The Vatican has just released a decision that is sending waves through the global Catholic community. A key commission has voted overwhelmingly against allowing women to become deacons, ruling that at this moment it is not possible to admit women to the sacrament of holy orders. This decision matters far beyond official church structures. It affects 1.4 billion Catholics across the world, touches on centuries of theological debate, and raises questions that go to the heart of tradition, history, and the role of women in modern faith communities. In this deep dive, we are going to explore what the Commission said, why the vote was so lopsided, how the early church actually handled women in ministry, and what this means for the future of Catholicism. Before we go further, let's clarify something essential. The vote was 7-1. 7 members of the commission said women cannot be ordained as deacons at this time, and 1 member supported the proposal. That begs the question, what exactly is a deacon, and why is this topic controversial at all? A Catholic deacon is an ordained minister who assists in the sacramental and pastoral life of the church. Deacons can baptize, preach homilies, witness marriages, lead funeral services, and support charitable and community ministries. They are essential in many parishes, often the bridge between the community and priestly leadership. But deacons cannot celebrate Mass or consecrate the Eucharist. Those responsibilities remain solely with priests and bishops. If you have been to a Catholic wedding, baptism, or funeral, you may have seen a deacon leading the service. They often wear a stole diagonally across their chest, symbolizing service. So why has the Catholic Church historically ordained only men as deacons? The answer lies in the structure of holy orders, which includes bishops, priests, and deacons, forming one unified sacrament. Historically, the Church has maintained that ordination reflects Christ's representation and therefore has reserved these offices to men. But here's where things get interesting. In the earliest centuries of Christianity, women did serve in roles called deaconesses. The New Testament even references a woman named Phoebe, whom St. Paul describes as a deacon of the church in Cenchrea. Scholars have debated for decades what exactly this title meant. Some argue that Phoebe and early deaconesses held liturgical authority. Others say these roles were pastoral but not sacramental, especially assisting with ministry, such as baptisms when immersion required modesty. So when modern Catholic sisters asked Pope Francis in 2016 to study whether women could become deacons today, they were pointing back to an ancient precedent. They asked a simple question: if women served as deacons before, why not now? Pope Francis responded by forming a study commission. That initial commission focused on historical evidence. After reviewing the findings, Francis decided the topic deserved deeper theological reflection, especially as the Church continues to discern women's roles in ministry. That led to a second commission, created in 2020. This group included 10 members, 5 women and 5 men, with a mixture of theologians, clergy, and permanent deacons. They met privately over multiple years, reviewing scripture, ancient writings, canon law, and theological arguments. Their discussions remained confidential until now. When Pope Francis retired and Pope Leo XIV succeeded him, the new pontiff authorized the release of the commission's findings. The result surprised some observers. Although many expected a divided or ambiguous conclusion, the vote was overwhelmingly against allowing women to enter the diaconate. But here is the nuance. The Commission was careful to say this conclusion is not final forever. They explicitly said that further study is needed on the nature of the diaconate itself, separate from the priesthood. They also emphasized that while women cannot be ordained as deacons right now, the Church must find new ways to broaden women's access to leadership and ministry, asking bishops worldwide to identify concrete roles women can assume without ordination. This means the Commission is not shutting the door entirely. Instead, they are saying the theological understanding of the diaconate is not settled enough to make such a historic change. At the center of this debate is a question: is the diaconate fundamentally a sacramental office tied to priesthood, or is it primarily a ministry of service where women could be included? Those who opposed women deacons argue that holy orders is one unified sacrament, and that if women were ordained deacons, it could create confusion or pressure to allow women priests. Others on the commission argued that the diaconate has unique purposes distinct from priesthood, and that history allows room for a restored female diaconate. But this view ultimately received only one vote. The president of the commission, Cardinal Giuseppe Petracci, explained that the divide came down to two theological interpretations of tradition. One sees the diaconate as a pastoral office that could theoretically be open to women. The other sees it as inseparably linked to priesthood, and therefore restricted to men. He emphasized that the commission did not fully resolve these differences, which is why they called for continued study. Reaction to the decision has been strong. Reform-minded theologians expressed frustration. Some argued the commission overlooked historical evidence of female deacons. Others said the vote reflects persistent resistance to women's leadership in the church. On the other hand, more traditional voices welcomed the decision as a consistent reaffirmation of long-standing doctrine. They argue that authentic development of church teaching must always remain faithful to biblical and sacramental foundations. Meanwhile, outside the Vatican, women's groups organized demonstrations, calling the decision disappointing and urging ongoing dialogue. For many Catholics, the topic symbolizes a broader question of how the Church adapts in a changing world. Pope Leo has stated he does not intend to rush doctrinal changes, but is committed to ensuring that women's roles and contributions are fully recognized. He urged Catholics to read the Commission's report as a step in a longer conversation, not the final chapter. The broader context also matters. Many Christian denominations already ordain women as ministers or deacons. Some Catholics see this as proof that the Church can adapt. Others argue that Catholic sacramental theology is unique and cannot simply follow other traditions. At the same time, Pope Francis introduced several reforms during his pontificate that expanded women's participation in non-ordained ministries. For example, he formally opened the instituted ministries of lector and acolyte to women, affirming their liturgical involvement as a permanent and official part of parish life. These changes signaled a willingness to broaden women's roles while maintaining the Church's teaching that ordination is reserved to men. The new Commission's report builds on that trajectory, encouraging new responsibilities but not sacramental ordination. But let's return to the heart of the issue. Why did the Commission say no? Their reasoning revolved around several theological points. First, the Commission concluded that historical evidence of women deacons is inconclusive regarding sacramental ordination. While early Christian communities certainly had deaconesses, the group determined that these roles were not identical to the sacramental diaconate reinstated after the Second Vatican Council. Second, the Commission emphasized that holy orders is one sacramental unity. Even though bishops, priests, and deacons have different functions, they are all part of one coherent sacramental structure. Because the Church teaches that priestly ordination is limited to men, the Commission believed it would be inconsistent to ordain women to a part of the same sacrament. Third, they worried that ordaining women as deacons might create the expectation that women could or should be ordained as priests. They feared this would introduce pressure for doctrinal changes the Church has repeatedly said it cannot make. But that does not mean everyone agreed. The lone member who voted in favor of female deacons argued that the diaconate's purpose is primarily service, not priestly function. This perspective holds that if women have historically exercised service roles, and if modern pastoral needs require more ministers, then women could be ordained without overturning any essential doctrine about priesthood. This debate reflects a broader theological question. Is the sacramental identity of the diaconate primarily linked upward toward priesthood or outward toward service? Those who say the diaconate is linked upward argue that it is inseparable from the sacramental priesthood. Those who say it is linked outward argue that it is fundamentally about service and therefore more flexible. The Commission's majority sided with the upward interpretation. However, there is a second, equally important part of their report that many people overlook. Alongside the vote rejecting women's ordination to the diaconate, the Commission also voted 9-1 in favor of broadening women's leadership and ministry opportunities within the Church. This is significant. It means the Commission simultaneously preserved tradition and encouraged development. In practical terms, what could this look like? Bishops may establish new commissioned ministries, such as parish leadership roles, pastoral coordinators, evangelization directors, catechetical leaders, or ministers of the Word. Many women already serve in these capacities informally. The Commission is calling for formal recognition, training, and stable positions. This suggests that while sacramental ordination is not changing, the Church is aware of the need to recognize women's gifts in concrete, meaningful ways. Let's now return to the historical roots to understand why the conversation is so complex. In the early centuries of Christianity, deaconesses played crucial roles in communities where social norms required gender-specific ministry. They assisted in adult female baptisms, cared for women who were ill, visited homes, and supported charitable works. Some ancient liturgical texts include rituals that resemble ordination prayers for deaconesses. However, scholars debate whether these rituals conferred sacramental authority equivalent to that of male deacons. The diversity of early Christian communities makes it difficult to draw definitive conclusions. This historical ambiguity fuels both sides of the modern debate. Advocates say history shows women held ministerial offices. Opponents say the evidence does not prove sacramental equivalency. The Commission reviewed these sources extensively, but ultimately concluded that history alone cannot justify ordaining women today. Let's move to the next dimension, the role of church leadership. Pope Francis initiated the study because he believed the Church must listen carefully to the voices of its people, especially women who serve in essential pastoral roles. He often spoke about avoiding clericalism, warning against assuming that leadership depends solely on ordination. Pope Leo continued this perspective but has emphasized caution. By publishing the report without endorsing change, he allowed the global Church to see the Commission's reasoning. His approach signals transparency but also continuity with established doctrine. This brings us to global reaction. Many theologians, Catholic sisters, and lay leaders express disappointment. They argue that opening the diaconate to women would enrich parish life, address priest shortages, and reflect the dignity and gifts of women. Some scholars criticize the Commission for what they viewed as selective use of historical evidence. Others said the decision sends a discouraging message to women who have devoted their lives to ministry. In Germany, reform groups called the decision pastorally and theologically questionable. In the United States, advocates for women's ordination issued strong statements, calling the vote an insult. Meanwhile, many traditional Catholics applauded the decision for safeguarding theological consistency. They argue that the Church must remain faithful to its sacramental understanding even if this is countercultural. These diverging reactions reflect deep divisions within contemporary Catholicism. Some want rapid modernization, others want preservation of doctrine. But here is the key insight. The Commission did not say the matter is closed forever. They said more study is needed. That means future commissions, councils, or popes could revisit the question. In the meantime, the most immediate impact will not be doctrinal but pastoral. Parish life will continue as usual. Deacons will remain male, women will continue leading countless ministries as educators, theologians, spiritual directors, pastoral associates, and community organizers. What may change is the formal structure surrounding those ministries. We may see new roles, new training programs, and new recognition for women's leadership. And for many Catholics, this is where the heart of the issue lies. How can the Church fully honor women's gifts even while maintaining sacramental traditions? The Commission's vote attempts to balance fidelity to the past with openness to the future. It invites Catholics worldwide to continue reflecting on how the Church can best serve today's communities. So where does this leave the global Church? in a place of tension but also possibility. The door to women deacons remains closed for now, but the conversation continues, and that, in the long view of church history, is significant. In the remainder of this discussion, we are going to explore what the decision means practically, what to watch for in the coming years, and how Catholics around the world might experience the evolving role of women in ministry. Now let's zoom in on practical implications for everyday parish life, because this is where many Catholics are asking the most concrete questions. First, will anything suddenly change on Sundays? No. The presence or absence of women deacons does not affect the structure of the Mass. Priests will continue celebrating the Eucharist, and deacons, where present, will continue assisting. Second, will parishes lose opportunities for women to serve? Not necessarily. In fact, the Commission's recommendation to broaden women's access to ministry may accelerate the formalization of roles that already exist informally. Many parishes rely heavily on women who serve as catechists, youth ministers, parish administrators, pastoral associates, retreat leaders, and coordinators of outreach programs. The Commission is encouraging bishops to give these roles clearer identities, better training, and stronger support. This could mean official commissioning ceremonies, pastoral certifications, structured formation programs, and greater responsibility in parish governance. Third, what about communities facing priest shortages? In some regions, especially rural areas or developing countries, there are far fewer priests than needed. Some reform advocates argued that women deacons could help meet urgent pastoral needs. The Commission acknowledged the concern, but concluded that service-oriented ministries can be strengthened without sacramental ordination. They emphasized that pastoral care is already practiced by countless women worldwide, and that these contributions can be formally recognized. This leads to another important point. The vast majority of church ministry in everyday life is actually carried out by lay people, not clergy. Consider hospital chaplaincy, prison outreach, religious education, faith formation, charity programs, refugee support, and spiritual direction. These ministries rely on trained lay leaders, many of them women. In fact, in many parts of the world, women run parish operations in ways that go far beyond administrative work. They maintain community life, coordinate liturgies, counsel families, minister to the sick, and ensure that parish outreach remains alive even when clergy are stretched thin. So while the decision not to ordain women as deacons is significant, it does not diminish the essential pastoral impact women already have. Next, let's explore how other Christian denominations handle the diaconate, because this provides helpful context for understanding Catholic debates. In Anglican, Lutheran, Methodist, and many Protestant communities, women can serve as deacons, pastors, or ministers. They preach, baptize, lead congregations, and oversee pastoral programs. Eastern Orthodox traditions vary. Some branches have restored or considered restoring the order of deaconesses, though not universally and not always sacramentally. So globally, the idea of women in diaconal ministry is not unusual. What makes the Catholic case unique is the theological link between diaconate and priesthood within one sacrament of holy orders. Critics of the Vatican's decision point out that other churches have integrated women in ministerial leadership without compromising doctrine or community identity. Supporters counter that Catholic sacramental theology has a distinct structure and that faithfulness to tradition must take precedence over cultural pressure. These contrasting viewpoints illustrate the tension between two goals: honoring continuity with the past and responding to pastoral needs of the present. Now let's examine the theological reasoning a bit more deeply, because the Commission's vote reflects centuries of reflection on Scripture, sacrament, and tradition. The Church teaches that holy orders is a sacrament instituted by Christ. It is not merely a functional position, but a spiritual reality meant to symbolize and embody Christ's relationship with the Church. Those who reject women deacons believe that representing Christ in sacramental ministry requires maintaining the male-only tradition, even at the diaconal level. They argue that this symbolism is not about status or capability, but about theological consistency. Those who support women deacons argue that the diaconate is distinct from priesthood. They see it not as representing Christ in sacramental actions, but as representing Christ in service.
They point to biblical examples of women in leadership, as well as early church communities where women exercise diaconical functions. This debate reveals different visions of what ordination symbolizes. Is it primarily sacramental identity or pastoral mission? The Commission concluded that this question remains unresolved and requires more scholarly work. Let's now turn to the reactions from theologians and Catholic thinkers, because their responses further illustrate the complexity of the issue. Some theologians expressed strong disappointment, calling the decision a missed opportunity for meaningful inclusion. They argue that the Church already depends heavily on women for ministry, so sacramental recognition would simply align theology with reality. Others criticized the Commission for what they saw as overly cautious interpretation of history. They claimed the early Church's references to deaconesses are stronger than acknowledged. Meanwhile, women who serve in various ministries shared mixed feelings. Many said the decision hurt but did not surprise them, and that they would continue serving their communities regardless of formal titles. Others said it raised questions about whether their contributions are fully valued. On the other hand, many Catholics welcomed the decision as an affirmation of doctrinal clarity. They felt that opening holy orders to women would blur the lines of sacramental theology and cause confusion about priesthood. They emphasized that dignity and equality do not require identical roles, and that men and women can have different spiritual responsibilities.
These responses reflect a spectrum of deeply held beliefs. For some, the decision feels like an unnecessary limit. For others, it feels like a necessary protection. Yet even among traditional Catholics, many agree with the Commission's call to expand women's non-ordained ministries. That brings us to an important point. The Church's recognition of women's leadership is evolving, even if sacramental ordination is not. Over recent decades, women have taken on increasing leadership roles in Catholic education, theology, canon law, pastoral councils, diocesan administration, and charitable organizations. Today, women lead major Catholic universities, direct international charitable agencies, and teach at pontifical faculties. They advise bishops, shape pastoral strategies, and contribute to theological scholarship. In many dioceses, women serve as chancellors, tribunal judges, and department directors, positions that carry significant authority. In parish life, women often form the backbone of community ministry. They organize outreach, lead prayer groups, coordinate social justice efforts, and support those suffering from loss or illness. The Commission acknowledges all these contributions and urges formal structures that reflect their importance. So the question becomes, how might the Church evolve in response to this call? One possibility is the creation of commissioned lay ministries with standardized training, formation, and public recognition. These could include pastoral ministers, parish coordinators, catechetical leaders, liturgical animators, or community evangelization ministers. These positions would not require sacramental ordination, but could carry real authority and responsibility. Another possibility is expanded leadership in diocesan governance, where women already serve in administrative and advisory roles. The Commission suggests strengthening these pathways and offering more long-term positions. Another area of possibility is theological education. More women today are earning advanced degrees in theology, scripture, and canon law. The Church could expand opportunities for them to teach, advise, and form future clergy. These developments would allow women to influence pastoral life, formation, and church governance while honoring current sacramental teachings. Let's shift to a broader view. What does this decision tell us about the Church's future? First, it shows that the Church is moving cautiously in matters related to sacramental identity. Doctrinal consistency remains a priority, especially in areas tied to holy orders. Second, it shows openness to pastoral development. While sacramental roles remain unchanged, non-ordained ministries are expected to grow. Third, it suggests the conversation is far from over. The Commission explicitly stated that more study is needed. That leaves open the possibility of future development.
So we are witnessing a church that is stable but not static. And this is consistent with how Catholic teaching has developed historically. Long-term change usually happens gradually after years of reflection, dialogue, and discernment. When you look at the long arc of church history, the 21st century is still early in the story of how women's roles are being re-examined. Let's now focus on what to watch for next, because the story is not finished. First, look for new national or diocesan guidelines on commissioned ministries. Bishops may create new pastoral roles specifically designed to elevate women's leadership. Second, expect more academic research. Universities, theologians, and scholars will likely publish new studies examining historical, scriptural, and theological arguments about women deacons. Third, watch the global synodal process. As the Church continues listening to Catholics in all regions, women's leadership will remain a major topic. Fourth, observe how Pope Leo continues shaping his pontificate. His openness to transparency, combined with doctrinal caution, suggests he will support expanded ministries while maintaining traditional sacramental boundaries. Finally, pay attention to how local communities respond. Some will embrace new ministries enthusiastically. Others will prefer to maintain familiar structures. Both reactions will influence how the Church evolves. So, what does all of this mean for the average Catholic? It means that the Church is in a moment of discernment. It means that women's leadership is likely to grow in new ways, even if sacramental ordination stays reserved to men. It means that pastoral life will continue adapting to the needs of modern communities. Most importantly, it means that every baptized person has a role to play. The Commission emphasized that baptism itself is the foundation of Christian service, and that the Church must continue developing ways to support the gifts of all its members. In summary, the Commission voted not to ordain women as deacons at this time, but simultaneously called for broader roles for women across ministries. This decision preserves tradition while encouraging development. The future remains open, the conversation continues, and the Church is invited to grow in ways that honor both its heritage and its mission. In the next section, we will move toward a final reflection on how this debate shapes the identity of the modern Church and what it reveals about the challenges and hopes of faith communities today. As we move into this final reflection, it's important to take a step back and consider what this entire debate reveals about the Catholic Church in our time. First, it highlights a tension between heritage and adaptation. The Church holds a 2,000-year-old tradition shaped by scripture, theology, and lived experience. That tradition is not something leaders believe they can adjust quickly or without serious reflection. At the same time, the modern world presents new pastoral challenges, new cultural landscapes, and new expectations about equality, leadership, and representation. The question of women deacons sits exactly at the crossroads of these forces. Second, this debate illustrates how deeply Catholics care about the meaning of ministry. For some, the possibility of women deacons represents justice, representation, and a fuller use of the gifts within the Church. For others, it represents a potential rupture in sacramental identity, something they believe must remain theologically intact. Third, it reveals the complexity of interpreting history. The early Church was diverse, with local communities developing different practices. Some included women in diaconal roles, others did not. Some used rituals similar to ordination, others treated them as forms of blessing or commissioning. The Commission's challenge was to discern not just what happened historically, but what it means theologically today. Fourth, it reveals how the Church understands leadership. For centuries, leadership was closely tied to ordination. Today, leaders within the Church increasingly recognize that leadership is broader than sacramental functions. Teaching, counseling, community organization, and pastoral accompaniment are all forms of leadership that do not require ordination but have profound impact. Fifth, this debate underscores the importance of listening. Women worldwide have been asking the Church to consider their roles more deeply. They serve in countless ministries, often carrying the weight of parish life. Their voices are essential to the Church's ongoing discernment. Finally, it shows that the future of the Church is not predetermined. While doctrine may set certain boundaries, pastoral life, ministry structures, leadership opportunities, and community engagement all continue to evolve. With the Commission's vote now public, the Church enters a new phase, one that includes clarity about the present and openness about the future. For many Catholics, especially women, who have devoted their lives to service, the decision was painful. They hoped for recognition through ordination, and now they must accept that, for the time being, the Church has chosen a different path. For others, the decision brings relief.
They see it as a sign that the Church remains committed to its sacramental identity. Yet these two responses are not mutually exclusive. Even among those who welcomed the decision, many agree that the Church needs to expand the ways it supports and recognizes women's leadership. Even among those who were disappointed, many continue to serve with dedication and hope for future development. The Commission itself acknowledges that the conversation must continue. This is not a closed door.
It is a moment of pause, reflection, and re-evaluation. In the long timeline of church history, processes like this unfold slowly. Change, if it comes, emerges from decades of prayer, study, and discernment. The Commission's vote is a snapshot of the Church's thinking at this moment, not necessarily a prediction of its thinking in 50 years. So what should we take away from this? First, that the Church is trying to balance fidelity to tradition with pastoral responsiveness. Second, that women's leadership is already essential and will continue to grow. Third, that discussions about ministry and ordination will remain important topics in coming decades. Fourth, that every Catholic, regardless of background, has a role to play in shaping the Church's future. The Commission's decision may feel like a setback for some and a reassurance for others, but it is also an invitation to reflect, to study, to listen, and to serve. The story is far from over. As new generations of Catholics engage with questions of ministry, service, and identity, the Church will continue discerning how to live its mission authentically and faithfully. So as we conclude, remember this: the vote on women deacons is not the end of the conversation. It is part of a larger journey the Church is walking, one that invites all of us to think more deeply about how we are called to serve, to lead, and to build communities shaped by faith, compassion, and hope. And with that, we reach the end of our exploration. Whether you come from a background of devotion, scholarship, curiosity, or pastoral experience, thank you for engaging with this important question. Understanding the Church's decisions helps us better understand the Church's identity, and perhaps our own role within it. The conversation continues, the mission continues, and the discernment continues. And as the Church moves forward, one thing remains certain: the gifts of its people, men and women alike, will shape its future in profound and lasting ways.